Loki has eaten a devil fruit so powerful that the giants believe that if he is ever let free, he can bring the entire world to ruin. A fruit so valuable that Loki was willing to kill even his own father to get it. And so the big question we have at the start of this arc is, what could this fruit possibly be? And interestingly, all signs point to the fruit's name having already been revealed all the way back in the Little Garden arc, when we first met the giants of Elbaph. In this arc, we were told the name of a god that the giants worshipped above all others. Not Nika, but the warrior god, Elbaph himself. That's right, the fruit that the entire conflict of Elbaph is now centered around may be the very same as the name of the arc, the island, and the race of giants itself. A long foreshadowed counterpart to the Hito Hito no Mi model Nika, the Hito Hito no Mi model Elbaph. Loki has very possibly just gained the power of the very warrior god that we were first introduced to when we learned of Elbaph. The god that was emphasized as being the most important to Elbaph's culture, even more important than Nika. Now if you're confused, if you don't believe that another god fruit makes sense, or if you think that the god Elbaph was just a minor offhand mention that Oda dropped in Little Garden, that's not the case. This god Elbaph was heavily woven into the entire narrative of Little Garden, and when connected back to the modern story reveals about Elbaph's culture as well as various clues throughout the New World, all signs point more and more to Loki having eaten the fruit of the warrior god Elbaph. So let's break it down from the start, but before we get into it, make sure to subscribe. But first, the holiday season is coming up, and that means Halloween parties and other social events where you're gonna want to look good. Luckily, Manscaped is offering 20% off the best grooming tool on the market, the new Chairman Pro. Remember, a clean shave or a carefully crafted level of stubble can up your attractiveness significantly. And the Chairman Pro has a 4-blade foil for a super close shave, and a skin-safe stubble trimmer to get that slightly more rugged look. And the coolest thing by far is the Flex Adjust technology, because I know when I'm shaving, the hardest parts by far to get are around the sides of my face and my neck. But with the Chairman Pro, the blades and the pivoting head flex and adjust to the contours of my face and neck. It genuinely feels way more comfortable and easy, so I'm getting a cleaner shave a lot faster without having to worry about nicking myself. So if you're looking to up your dating game for the holiday social events coming up, particularly Halloween, the Chairman Pro is your answer. So just use promo code MORGE to get the Chairman Pro for 20% off plus free international shipping at manscaped.com, link in the description below. So that aside, to begin with, we know 3 things related to this fruit. First, that this fruit is extraordinarily powerful even by the standards of top-tier devil fruits. This fruit has specifically been referred to as legendary, which is an extremely rare description in One Piece, as even out of all the countless powerful fruits that we've heard of so far, only one has really been called legendary, which is the sun god Nika fruit itself, and we all know the potentially limitless power of that fruit. So for another fruit to be explicitly called legendary immediately draws comparisons to the Nika fruit itself. The fact that Loki went so far as to kill his own father for this fruit also reinforces the fact that narratively Oda is framing this fruit as something extremely special, as this act parallels the one other notable instance of a character committing a deeply immoral personal murder for a devil fruit, when Blackbeard killed his crewmate Thatch for the Yami Yami no Mi. And we all know how important the Yami Yami no Mi turned out to be. Finally, this mysterious fruit that Loki ate is held in such high regard specifically by the nation of Elbaph, which is canonically the most powerful nation in existence. Big Mom truly believed that with the giants on her side, she could conquer the entire New World. So this isn't some random island claiming that this is a legendary fruit. This is the already legendary most powerful nation of warriors on the planet, claiming that by their standards, this is a legendary fruit. So whatever fruit this is, it's not just some Logia or even just some average mythical Zoan. It is very possibly something comparable to the caliber of Luffy's own legendary Nika fruit. Second, we know that the fruit is specifically something that is precious to the kingdom of Elbaph. It is tied to the nation itself, as it has been passed down specifically through the royal family of Elbaph for generation after generation. As such, it is likely that this fruit isn't just an arbitrary legendary fruit, but rather something tied in some specific way to the kingdom and its people, something that makes it Elbaph's national treasure. For instance, the national treasure of Wano was the sword of its strongest samurai. And third, we were given one strong hint from Loki in that he says that he is going to be the sun god that destroys the world. So here is where it gets interesting, because this suggests that whatever fruit Loki has eaten, it seems to give him the belief that he will now have the ability to play out the role of the sun god for the world. But we know that it can't be the literal sun god fruit, as Luffy already has that, so there must be something more to this line. So with these 3 points, that this is a legendary and extraordinarily powerful fruit, that it is passed down specifically through the nation of Elbaph, and therefore very likely symbolically or thematically tied to the nation in some way, and finally that it gives Loki the belief that he can play the role of the sun god and destroy the world, a very interesting possibility opens up, that may have been foreshadowed literally 1,000 chapters back. To begin with, how are devil fruits created? Devil fruits are born out of the desires of individuals. If individuals dream hard enough of certain powers, abilities, possibilities, or ideas, then those dreams can actually come into reality in the form of devil fruits. That's how the Nika fruit exists in the first place. Enough people believed in this concept of Nika, this dancing warrior god of liberation, and so with enough belief, the Nika fruit was born, so that Nika could become an actuality in reality. Whether or not an actual original Nika god exists or not doesn't matter. The beauty is that through the dreams of the people, Nika can be created. Now we know that Nika is a recognized god in Elbaph culture. Dory, Brogy, and the other giant warrior pirates all recognize what Nika looks like and acknowledge him. Vegapunk also states that Nika is spoken of in Elbaph's legends. However, Nika is not Elbaph's only god. In fact, Nika is canonically not even the most important god in their culture. No, the most important god to the warriors of Elbaph is God Elbaph himself. That's right, if you go back and read Little Garden, all the way back in chapter 116, the first ever god in the One Piece world is named God Elbaph. He is the end-all be-all god for the Elbaph giants. Throughout Little Garden, Dory and Brogy constantly refer to and invoke God Elbaph as the ultimate warrior god. They believe that Elbaph will be the one to decide the winner of their duel. They believe that if they are fated to win or not comes down to Elbaph deeming their worthiness. They call upon Elbaph for strength, they look to Elbaph for divine judgment. Everything for the giants begins and ends with their belief in the god Elbaph. Interestingly, in all of One Piece, this is the first arc that regularly discusses the topic of God, with Luffy and the giants even debating the will of this god. Long before Skypiea or Wano, Little Garden was actually the arc that the discussion of gods of certain cultures truly began, and the arc is steeped very heavily in this discussion. There's also no real debate that Elbaph is the undisputed predominant god of the nation of Elbaph. Even Nika is secondary to Elbaph in the eyes of the giants. As we can see, Dory and Brogy refer to Nika as a god that is known among their people that they tell tales of, but that is nothing close to the preeminence and absolute saturation of the god Elbaph in their culture. As again, their entire culture of war, honor, and strength is built around their absolute belief in God Elbaph himself. And they believe Elbaph determines every single victory or defeat, every fortune or misfortune that they experience. I mean, the entire nation is literally named after Elbaph. So even if Nika is known and spoken of as a prominent god among the giants, it is clear that God Elbaph is their one god above all other gods. So with that in mind, if devil fruits are born out of individuals' beliefs in a concept or idea, and enough people believing in a god can create a god devil fruit, for example the Nika fruit being born out of many people's beliefs in the god Nika, well then what about this god that the entire nation of Elbaph worships, God Elbaph? If literally an entire race so obsessively believes in him, then why wouldn't there be a Hito Hito no Mi model Elbaph? A fruit that allows one to turn into the ultimate warrior god. Not a joyous, laughing, unorthodox warrior that brings smiles to faces like Nika, but rather a traditional embodiment of violence and might. A genuine warrior god as Elbaph is portrayed to be. Objectively speaking, based on everything we know of how devil fruits are created and how the Nika fruit came to be, there is no logical reason that the Elbaph god fruit would not also exist, considering the absolute level of belief that the entire race of Elbaph giants seem to have in him. Unless Oda simply wishes to retcon the whole concept of God Elbaph from Little Garden, and instead focus on the sun god as the main focus of the Elbaph giants to fit with the newer ideas of the story better. Because if Oda stops mentioning God Elbaph and instead only has the giants talk about the sun god as though that was always their main deity, well that would make like the majority of Dory and Brogy's dialogue and motivations in Little Garden basically retconned. In fact, if God Elbaph is no longer mentioned in the Giants' culture in this current arc, and the Giants only talk about the Sun God, then that would actually probably be the single biggest retcon in One Piece. Now, the possibility of such a large retcon is entirely possible, as, to be fair to Oda, Little Garden was literally 1,000 chapters back. We can give Oda some leeway for not thinking to have the Giants talk about a sun god back then, if Oda didn't have that aspect of the future narrative conceived yet. However, that doesn't change the fact that if in this Elbaph arc the Giants from here on exclusively talk about Nika, the sun god, as their primary deity from here on, that would be a retcon. However, part of what makes me believe that there isn't going to be any retcon regarding God Elbaph, and that Oda always wanted to incorporate this god into the future Elbaph arc, is that Little Garden is specifically where Oda was deliberately planting the seeds for the Elbaph arc. It seems like Oda was planning the key aspects of Elbaph, such as the heavy focus on Usopp, when he was writing Little Garden. So if anything, most of the ideas that Oda set up in this short Little Garden arc are likely to be the foundational concepts that we are going to see play out as the Elbaph arc continues. As such, if Oda was very specific in repeatedly establishing God Elbaph as the centerpiece of the Giants' culture back in Little Garden, then there's a good chance that Oda was planting this to be significant for the Elbaph arc down the line. Meaning, so long as the Giants' culture hasn't been completely retconned, and all the Giants of Elbaph strongly believe in God Elbaph as their primary god, as was originally established, then this Elbaph fruit should exist, and if this fruit does exist, then it nearly perfectly fits all the criteria of what has been established about Loki's mystery fruit so far. So if we were to look again at the points that we know, this Elbaph fruit would of course make sense to be given the same legendary status similar to Nika. In fact, if there were any other legendary god fruit introduced at this point in the story, then God Elbaph has to be the frontrunner, as it is the second most mentioned god in the story after Nika, and it was actually mentioned much earlier than Nika. And obviously the God Elbaph fruit would be highly relevant and fitting as the legendary fruit of the Elbaph arc. This God Elbaph fruit would of course fit the second point as well, that it has been passed down through the royal family of Elbaph for generations, as of course the national treasure of the devil fruit of the literal God Elbaph would be the most prized possession of the nation, a possession that naturally the royal family would pass down from generation to generation, from warrior king to warrior king. And lastly, this final point can be partway reconciled. Loki says that he will be the sun god that destroys the world. Now again, he is not talking about the Nika fruit, obviously, as Luffy has that, so Loki can't be the literal sun god. But the God Elbaph fruit would still fit the bill of at least being a god fruit that could be used to destroy the world. In this vein, Loki may be referring to playing out the role of the sun god in Elbaph's mythology. Even if Loki doesn't actually specifically have the sun god fruit, he has attained a god fruit. In Elbaph mythology, it sounds as though the sun god is tied to the cycle of ending and rebirth. So ending the world may be simply referring to playing the role of the sun god rather than actually having the sun god fruit specifically. The Elbaph god fruit would still be powerful enough to allow Loki to carry out this role. And along those lines, this God Elbaph fruit would be particularly fitting for Loki, as we know that in One Piece, Oda always writes the devil fruit to match the wielder. Literally throughout the story, you can pick any fruit. It matches the wielder's persona in some way, or at least their narrative. Big Mom gives life. Doflamingo is a puppet master, Gecko Moria is a shadow of his former self, so on and so forth. Whatever fruit Loki has fits his character and persona. And from what we have seen of Loki, he is being portrayed as a monstrously powerful warrior. So strong that his presence gave Luffy goosebumps from across the island. So strong that his roars make all of Elbaph shake. So strong that all the warriors of Elbaph had to fight him together just to contain him. And Loki is clearly aggressive and violent in intent, planning to destroy the entire world when he is freed. So from everything we know of Loki so far, a warrior god devil fruit would be the perfectly fitting fruit for him. Interestingly, Loki himself seems like he's set to be a combination of both Kaido and Doflamingo as a villain, though you can get my extended thoughts on that on my weekly podcast by hitting the button below to become a member or by supporting me on Patreon, link in the description below. But before we get into it, this spooky season you can get Onigashima, Hachinosu, and Thriller Bark as travel posters for your walls. And in case you missed it, every month we are bringing the entire world of One Piece to life, island by island, with new batches being released every month. So if you want to get this Halloween trio of islands, they are only available this month of October and then never again. But the best part is, with your bundle of posters, you get an invite to join me live on stream to discuss any One Piece topic that you want, and share your One Piece ideas in front of thousands of viewers. Plus, you'll also be able to join me in a smaller, more private group setting happy hour that I'll be hosting online once a month. Plus, you'll get a 20% discount on all other items in the Morge store, and a hand-drawn Brook bookmark, a Brookmark, thrown in for free. And finally, with each poster comes a code. The first person to solve the code wins the Great Pirate Race and wins the Grand Mystery Prize, along with being featured as the winner on the channel. You get all of that bundled together with your travel posters. And again, this trio of posters are only going to be printed and produced this month of October and this month only. So hit the link in the description below to get your bundle today. Grab this collection before it's gone. Now lastly, this hypothetical Elbaph god fruit may even explain one of the longest standing mysteries in One Piece. We see something in Elbaph that is remarkably similar to what we saw in Onigashima. A sword so absurdly large that it seems impossible for anyone to have actually wielded it, be it human, giant, or even ancient giant. These weapons are simply far too big for any living being to use, and yet someone must have wielded them as they exist. We know they're not simply an aesthetic choice that Oda will never explain, as it was established that there is some secret to Onigashima that we have yet to uncover, meaning the truth of the giant skull and who once wielded the sword will one day be revealed. But seeing a sword of this size yet again on Elbaph, an island of giants, even more clearly seems to establish that it is possible for beings to reach unimaginable sizes. So was this a naturally enormous being, or could it have been the result of a warrior god devil fruit? A fruit that allows whoever eats it to become a gigantic warrior god, gigantic even by the standards of the Elbaph giants who worship him, as it is of course a god to the giants themselves. The fact that multiple beings seem to have existed at different points in history wielding swords of this size suggests that this may have been the case. Now one might argue that this would not explain Onigashima's skull being left behind, as when the user died and the fruit left their body, their bones should have returned back to normal size hypothetically, but it's honestly impossible to say how certain devil fruit effects work post-mortem. For instance, if Chopper died in his usual tiny form, would his skeleton bones then morph back into a skeleton of his original deer form? It's hard to say. Regardless, what we do know is that God Elbaph is the second most highlighted god in all of One Piece. An entire race believes in this god Elbaph. Devil fruits are born out of people's beliefs. The Nika fruit was born the very same way. A fruit of God Elbaph should exist. And considering we are currently at the island of Elbaph itself, where there is a legendary devil fruit here that has been passed down through the royal family of Elbaph for generations, and Loki, a great and violent warrior, has taken it for himself, and now believes that he has a godlike power that can allow him to destroy the world, I think there is, at the very least, a good chance that this is the fruit of the warrior god Elbaph. So let me know if you believe Loki could have the Elbaph fruit in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this video then definitely like and subscribe. And you can get my extended thoughts on how Loki's character seems to be a blend between Kaido and Doflamingo on my weekly podcast, by either becoming a member below or supporting me on Patreon, link in the description below.